Non-manufacturing, real estate are all badly hit due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is our small effort to really understand from the industry leaders, influencers, and professionals about not only the impact on these sectors, but also really know how will these sectors revive back amidst the COVID era. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Modi ji also assured the India Inc. that growth in the economy will return soon as the government continues to pursue multiple reforms, ensuring India's growth, which will help become India Atmanirbhar to bounce back. So to get a sense of the scenario, we are joined live and exclusive by a very, very special guest with us today, an ace administrator with a great panache, known for his out-of-box thinking, has scripted numerous reforms and effected organizational transformations. He has held various cabinet portfolios and been 6 times the Member of Parliament. Presently, the MP and official emissary of the Prime Minister of India in the G7 and G20 forums. In a short span, he has engaged with global leaders and thinkers, as well as led delegations across the globe. Shri Suresh Prabhuji. Thank you, sir, for joining us once again. We are truly humbled and honored to have you with us today. I would like to highlight that a lot of our attendees today are joining are the young guns from not only India, but from overseas as well. So quickly getting into our today's topic on the aspect of unemployment. As per the Center for Monitoring of Indian Economy, CMIE, there were about more than 100 million job losses in the formal as well as informal sector just in the month of April alone. Rural unemployment at 26.7% and urban unemployment at 25.1%. Lower growth because of falling demand and supply constraints is not only making fresh job creation tougher, but also hurting those who are currently employed. So, sir, what's the sense that you are picking up about what can potentially be done to try and minimize or at least reduce the job losses? Over to you, Suresh, sir.
See, you must keep the backdrop in mind very clearly. It's not just India, but whole world. And I cannot even count on my fingertips the number of countries who are not affected by corona.
True.
Very difficult to say which are the countries which are not affected.
Absolutely.
So probably almost all the countries are affected. And in a situation wherein we don't have a proper vaccine or a known medical protocol or globally accepted medication to deal with a pandemic of this kind, only way we can save the population from getting affected by it is by preventing spread of it. But it's a very highly communicable disease. The WHO itself has said you can be contacting the virus just by in contact with somebody.
Yeah.
So to prevent that possibility of you contacting it, you have to make sure that we came out with a system wherein the contact itself is avoided. To avoid the contact, one of the places where the contact takes place is when we do economic activity or we have social functions. So both had to be stopped, abandoned for some time, and to enforce that it happens on a scale that is required. Like many other countries in the world, India had to put certain restrictions on movement of people. That resulted in suspension of economic activity, which had resulted in people who are employed, gainfully employed in those economic activities have obviously suffered. To minimize that adverse impact, you have to identify the affected people. So one people who are affected are the daily wage earners, who may be skilled semi-skilled or unskilled, in all three categories. The carpenters, the plumbers, the electricians are in the skilled category. Those who assist them, not fully trained, but still they're unskilled. And others who purely do labor work are unskilled. All three categories were more or less earning in the unorganized sector. The organized sector has some safety system. Social safety measures are already integral part of certain labor laws. But if they are not governed, they have these challenges. So immediately what government did was, government provided free ration to some people. They transferred money into the bank accounts, like Jan Dhan account. For the farmers, because there are some farmers and farm laborers, they were given an advance payment of what was promised under the Prime Minister's Kisan Yojana. And to that extent, the financial blow that they suffered was tried to be minimized. Other sectors are the small scale industries, who also suffered because of suspension of economic activities. For them, it was provided that they'll get 50,000 crores of government guaranteed credit facilities, which will help them tide over the working capital challenges. As you know, the working capital is a net result between the total current liabilities and current assets. You can hold current assets in the form of stock in trade or in the form of receivables, or in case of bank balances, they're all current assets. Current liabilities are the ones which have to pay for the suppliers. You have to pay for the fixed expenses. So with government giving support for working capital to take care of current liabilities and also to build certain current assets, will obviously help that segment also. Now, the economic activity is starting again because there has been a partial reopening of economy. The lockdowns, depending upon local situations, are being lifted. The resumption of economic activity itself will ensure that those who lost gainful employment will be re-employed again. So I think this was a very difficult decision, but had to be taken in the larger interest of the people to save lives. The twin challenge before the government was to save lives, but also to protect livelihood. So to protect livelihood, many of these measures were taken, and to save lives, obviously, till we have a known medication or a vaccine, we have to resort to measures of this kind. So I'm sure this was a decision which was not taken out of any other consideration than to help the people themselves and to minimize the adverse impact of health-related decisions on economic issues have been softened by these measures that I mentioned and many more that the Prime Minister has taken. For many places, thanks to the appeal of the Prime Minister and others, including me, we ran community kitchen. We provided relief to those who were stranded. I remember one instance. I'm a member of Parliament for Andhra Pradesh. So 6,000 fishermen were stranded in Verawal in Gujarat. They called the fishing, they couldn't return. We provided them support of taking care of them while they were in Verawal. Then evacuated them from there and we brought them back to Srikakulam in Andhra Pradesh. So this has been a number of such measures which have been taken, and I'm sure we need to do more. And as we do, when we open the economy, we'll have to restore. But this is a very unprecedented emergency that humanity has never faced. So these are unprecedented challenges which you have to suffer and face and do in such a way that we have to have a trade-off. To save lives, some livelihood. Now, to save livelihood, what is to be done? So we have to work on that.
Absolutely. So how do you think the nature of jobs is changing, and people across, as you mentioned, that it not only our country, a lot of countries are hard hit by this unprecedented situation. So how the youngsters should prepare for the changing natures of job, considering the advances in technology, more automation, artificial intelligence, which is reducing the number of jobs available across nations.
See, if you're right that over a period of time, the nature of job creation globally is undergoing a sea change. It happens through a process. Like US has got less than 3-4% people depend on agriculture. In India, we have got almost half of the population depend on agriculture and related activities. Not only agriculture, related activities. How did the countries make this transition? In those countries, the services sector grew faster. Even after losing agriculture share in the GDP, some of those countries lost their share in manufacturing as well. In India, we have to balance all three. We have to ensure that we protect livelihood in agriculture by taking some people who are not interested in agriculture, and there is a disguised employment in agriculture. There are more people in agriculture than what is needed economically on agriculture. But people are still on agriculture because there is no choice. So we have to train them, provide them skills-based training, and those who are not interested in agriculture but are forced to be in agriculture because there is no other choice can be gainfully employed out of agriculture. From farm jobs, they will have to be provided off-farm jobs. So that's the first transition we have to make, and therefore skill-based training is a very important element. I'll give my personal example. In Konkan, where I was elected 4 times to Lok Sabha, we have given such job-based training in the last 25 years to over 1 lakh people. And many of them are self-employed. So one is to protect employment in agriculture in such a way that excess people can be gainfully employed off farm. Those who are on farm, their jobs also need to be protected by increasing the farm income. So that on one hand, less people will share that income, but the income itself goes up, that will help the farmers. To do that, the doubling of farmers' income is Prime Minister's program. But also, we have to take a number of other measures, including agriculture export, which will ensure that farmers' income will increase. Therefore, as Commerce Industry Minister, had come out with first ever India's agriculture export policy, which can increase farm income, because when you export out, in India, if there's a more production of agriculture products, the prices will fall. So it's a double whammy for the farmer, that he has produced more by increasing more cost and prices have fallen. So he is actually not only making money but losing money. So farm sector agriculture, we have to make sure that first we increase the farmers' income, those who are interested in farming. On the other hand, we have to make sure that those who are not interested but still forced to be there, we have to provide jobs by skill-based training. Second segment is industry. We have to increase the share of industry into GDP. So when I was Commerce Industry Minister, I prepared a plan to increase share of GDP into share of manufacturing to GDP from current 16% to 20%, which will ensure that we will be able to increase the share as well as create more jobs. Again, in that industry segment, we have to be part of a global supply chain, so that small scale industries will also benefit. If small scale industries get developed, then automatically there will be more job creation. If small scale industries could be self-employed, therefore that will also happen. In industry segment, we have to also do startups. We have to encourage startups. So people will be gainfully employed, use the technology, new ideas, and can become, as Prime Minister said, not only job seekers but job providers. To do this, as Commerce Industry Minister, I had encouraged startups in a big way. Even today, I'm involved with startups and innovation ecosystem in a big way. I had organized India's first ever roundtable in Goa on the 6th of December 2018 with all the startup community so that they can get funding for it. Then we are also trying to encourage states to have their own startup policy and create own web-based marketing possibilities for the startup. I had worked with startup community to remove unnecessary regulation, which is preventing innovation to come to fore. So this will help new job creation in that sector. Then comes services. We want to increase the contribution of services to GDP by getting 12 champion sectors which can create more jobs. That's a challenge because services are the only sector which can create more jobs. Industry, as you correctly pointed out, because of innovation, technological integration, might not get as many jobs, though self-employment must rise. But in services, whether it is communication, whether it is hospitality, whether it is information technology,
tourism,
transportation, logistics, all this can create huge jobs. Therefore, we identified 12 champion sectors and we are encouraging those 12 champion sectors to grow. Now, all of this together, we have prepared a plan which can create new job opportunities. Jobs will have a different connotation. There was a time when job means only government jobs. Then came a time when jobs means only private sector jobs. Now comes the situation where jobs will be of a different kind. There will be jobs government may not create, but private sector will create. For example, there was a job creation which used to happen in the government through postal department. But now the job creation will happen through courier service. Same system, but private sector will create. There is a job which will be created for law and order by police department. That will continue to happen. But safety related measures can be handled by security guards, private security agencies. They will create jobs. So nature of job will change. Self-employment must rise to do all these measures again.
Considering the plight of the migrant workers and also the rural-urban imbalance, what we are facing, we have never seen urban going back to rural. Entire period which we are seeing is rural people coming to urban areas. And this is a significant change, a change which tells us the people who came to urban from rural with aspirations within them, many of them have ended up in slums, chawls with jobs, with employers having less job security. And now the virus scare in cities. A high time for us to the get the rural urban rebalance. So how do you see big investments in rural India, rural infrastructure, healthcare, jobs and opportunities for people in villages and semi-urban areas? And at the same time, what happens to people who need migrants in their businesses in urban India?
See, we must accept a reality that still the rural areas are not as developed as urban areas. That's why there is an influx of people coming from rural to urban areas. There's opportunities in urban areas more, and urbanization is one way of increasing the pace of growth. But at the same time, we must ensure that our rural area also get developed properly. So, number of schemes for the government of India to make rural area develop faster, which will ensure that there will not be any incentive or forced migration from urban area to rural areas. Whenever there's a drought, people migrate from rural area to urban area because there's no choice. That's a forced migration. But there can be not forced, but migration coming out of choice. But they will get more opportunity. That, of course, is a good idea. People, aspirational migration is not a bad idea. But forced migration can be avoided by doing many things. One of the projects, I'll just tell you. I started a program. How do you make every district of India grow at more than 3% than its normal growth? See, the baseline growth is 6%, how it can go by 3%. Based on locally available resources and locally available manpower. What is the jobs that can be created in services, in industry, in manufacturing, and in agriculture in that district, whereby in the rural area itself, people will be able to do it. National Council for Applied Economic Research and Indian Institute of Management have already prepared reports for this. This will create a completely different kind of new opportunities for people in the rural area. This will create economic enterprises can be grown. And that will ensure that this urban-rural divide can be addressed properly because people will get their amenities there. During the time when there was Prime Minister Vajpayee and Dr. Abdul Kalam was the Prime President, there was a scheme of Pura, providing urban facilities in rural areas. Now, Prime Minister Modi has taken even another step. He wants to offer top-class facilities in rural areas. This again will help in bridging rural divide. But most importantly, the technology will help us a great deal. People want to come for medical facilities to urban areas, for schooling in urban areas. Now, schooling and medical facilities can be provided in the rural area itself by working through high-end technological solutions. So this will help a great deal to bridge the divide. In fact, I'll tell you my personal experience. In Konkan area, where I was elected 4 times to Lok Sabha, we started a program for 2,000 villages in 1996, 24 years ago, when there was no computerization, nothing of the kind that we see today. We allowed people to use computer, and those were illiterate, using touch screens to make this happen. Dr. Abdul Kalam came to inaugurate it because he was my good friend, because when I was a Minister of Power, he was still a Principal Secretary to the government, Principal Scientific Advisor to the President. So we used to discuss a lot. So then he came there to inaugurate it. He liked the idea so much, he started talking about bridging urban-rural divide through digital transformation. So this is possible. Thank you.
So if any questions from the audience, we would like to take any questions if there are. Otherwise, we have one more question coming up. So with so much globalization and interdependencies on other nations of India, how does India become self-reliant and Atmanirbhar, as stated by our Honorable Prime Minister?
The whole idea should be that each individual in India should have the ability to realize his true potential by government providing necessary infrastructure, removing unnecessary hurdles, so every person works to his true potential and therefore he becomes self-reliant. Because if his potential is realized, he can become good to defend for himself and his family. So that is what we should try to do by allowing local enterprises to grow. We should be globally competitive and we should sell their products globally through an open economy that will be available for Indian entrepreneurs to access. To do this, we have to build rural economy stronger, make our Indian businesses more competitive. We must give them strength so they can withstand the competition in global markets, as well as they will be able to outbid anyone who would like to compete them in Indian market. So I think this is something which we have to do. And if we do this, we have an access to global markets. At the same time, our company will be so globally competitive that they can take advantage of it. And would have developed an ecosystem wherein local businesses can become globally scalable, as the Prime Minister also has mentioned the other day. Local brands should become global brands. So I think we should work on that strategy, which can benefit each one of us immensely over a period of time.
So, sir, being Prime Minister Sherpa to G7 and G20 forums, what will be your advice to the Prime Minister looking at the unprecedented scenario? What is it that can be done in these hard or testing times, for that matter?
So firstly, there is nothing like that we can discuss in this particular manner. But one thing is sure, that India is facing a very unique situation in which the world is in crisis. There has never been such a crisis. There is now, only yesterday the OECD has said that a global economy will be contracted by more than 7%. It's a very huge thing. We have never seen anything like this in the last century. So in a situation like this, we are lucky to have a Prime Minister Modi, who is a leader, who is leading from the front, taking all necessary decisions. He is also working to deal with the immediate problem, but also has not overlooked the necessity for India's medium-term and long-term interest. So in a situation like this, I'm sure we'll emerge stronger, better from this present crisis. And to do that, this new mission of Atmanirbhar Bharat will also help us substantially if all people in India join this movement. And to do that, I'm sure youth of India will have a much better future than what they could have imagined if they take this unprecedented advantage of this unprecedented situation. So I think they should try to do that. And I therefore wish all of them a great success. This, as they always say, that when going gets tough, tough gets going. I think we should become tough now and try to work on taking this challenge as an opportunity and try to work towards it.
So I am going to leave it over there, sir. And it's been really fascinating to see the breadth and the depth of what you have been able to cover over the past 29 minutes. Thank you so much for sharing your positivity, your enthusiasm, giving a realistic sense of where we stand and where we need to go. And we really hope that the bounce back happens sooner and much stronger, as you just mentioned right now. Thank you so much, sir, and we deeply appreciate your time.
Thank you.